Yeah, thank you everyone, and good evening. Everyone should be looking at the title page of the PowerPoint presentation at this moment. So hopefully that's working at your end. So as Chris said, we're part two of the webinar series. This is on competitive analysis and market position. I'll be presenting with Darren, and as Chris mentioned, I'm a professor at the University of Northern British Columbia. My background has both a complement of business development and economic development, and my research program is focused on building the capacity of food systems, local food systems in British Columbia. So I've done some past work on farmers markets, but have been over the past 8 or 9 years or so. And a lot of it has culminated in this work where I take a business perspective to strategic planning for farmers markets. Darren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Darren Stott from Green Chain Consulting, and I do business planning and business strategizing for small and medium-sized businesses and organizations within the food sector, and I predominantly focus on local food and organic food and in the green sector, if you wish, hence Green Chain Consulting. And I've worked on a number of projects in the farmers markets realm, working on the New City Market project with Tara and her team at the Vancouver Farmers Markets. I've worked with Bruce in Abbotsford, Tabitha in Coquitlam, and working on a number of other projects as well that kind of involve farmers and distribution and connecting those to wholesale buyers. And projects in Pitt Meadows and one in Victoria as well, and what's known as food hubs as well, so kind of and the transition on from farmers markets with the indoor storage and commercial kitchens and so forth.
Thanks, Darren. Where we're starting is in the realm of planning, and any and every planning effort really has this aim to actively decide on a desirable path of development. So we went over these points at the last webinar. I just want to take a minute just to regroup, regroup what we talked about last time. So definitely in the world of planning, definitely looking to the future, and definitely having this eye on a desirable path of development. In the world of strategic business planning, what we brought to the fore was an external focus on competitors. It's having that external focus makes it strategic, and focusing specifically on competitors certainly gives it that business perspective. But what we talked about last time was that in order to look forward in that planning process, sometimes you just have to take a step or two backwards as a precursor, in terms of everyone finding the ground, let's getting together. So before moving forward, let's make sure that we're all on the same page. And that was really what we tried to do with part one of the webinar, which was getting started. What we wanted to do there, and hopefully it was a success for you guys, what we wanted to do there was to gauge you in a process of thinking about farmers markets as a business. So think about markets from a business perspective in particular. Now, the message we want to get across was that this isn't the only way to look at markets, and it's not, it shouldn't be at the exclusion of other ways of looking at markets, but it's meant to be an additional perspective that adds to what you already know about your market itself. The key message one of the key messages we got across last time is really focusing on that element, that essence of a farmer's market in terms of its core business. And here's the phrase that we put forward. So the core business of a farmer's market is to profit by bringing farmers and shoppers together in a unique setting. Within this statement, there's really 3 points that we wanted to make. One is that really introducing, explicitly bringing in this idea of profiting, just emphasizing the fact of the matter that farmers markets do have to be viable if they're going to be useful and helpful to the farmers and shoppers. Which brings us to the next point, in that markets have this unique situation where they don't just have a set of customers, but the farmers and crafters and everyone else the people who are selling at the market are also, in effect, customers for a market. So farmers markets have to be able to bring both of those, understanding the needs and wants of both sets of farmers and shoppers in order to bring them together. And ultimately, what the market does provide is a rather unique setting for all of this to take place. So this was the core business concept. This is the core idea that we wanted to bring out last week during the webinar. And the idea here is that it's thinking from a business perspective, but through that process, we also introduced business concepts and just words that, so it's one thing to say I'm thinking about the market like a business, but what we've tried to do is introduce words like this of profit and bringing shoppers together in a unique setting. We're bringing some of the concepts together. And that's what we're taking to the next level in this webinar. So in terms of evaluating where you're at today, part 2 in the second webinar in the series, focusing on both competitive analysis and market position. Now these terms may seem rather common perhaps to you, but they're actually very well used and very well developed concepts in the world of business analysis. What they are ultimately designed to do, and what we're using them for, is to help you understand your market's strengths. But as always, it's understanding your market strengths from a business perspective. So ultimately, if the aim of today's presentation to be reduced to a single concept, single statement, that really is what we're trying to accomplish today. So Darren, did you want to just add your thoughts to this?
Yeah, so I think we touched on this last week as well, but looking at your competitors, obviously what we're talking about last week and this week is a business strategy and identifying what your market is and what your competitive advantage is. And sometimes looking at your competition allows you to identify what your position is and what your strengths are. You know, if you're struggling to identify what those might be, or maybe your list is too long, looking at your competition says, well, okay, my competition is strong in X, Y, and Z, therefore I'm not X, Y, and Z. Or certainly that should not be my strength because my competitor, that's their strength in the market. So you're always trying to find that point of differentiation. So competitive advantage, differentiation is really the same thing. Once you've identified that, then that filters down, and this really is what a strategy document might look like, or a business plan. You're starting from the top, you're looking at your essence. So I mentioned that last week a number of times, and will be again today. And that allows you to really feed into your marketing plan, your communication plan, i.e. once you've identified your competitive advantage, your essence as a market. And so, for example, looking at your own competition, if your competition is more convenient than you are, there's no point talking about convenience. So that would not be part of your communication plan. If you've identified something that your competitor is not and you're strong at it, that's what you're talking about. Freshness, local food, that type of thing. It also allows you to go even further and help you understand your customers and the customers, the choice that they're making and what their expectations are of you. But also, going back to my days, I worked for a company called SPUD that some of you might know of. So that was an online company, a home delivery company. And so we knew that our customers were internet savvy, like shopping online. So competition to a certain extent would be the likes of Amazon because people are shopping online. So we knew full well that their expectations for shopping online were the likes of Amazon, and we had to deliver on that. So our website ordering system really could not be archaic. It needed to be quick and convenient and easy to use. So that allows you, looking at your competition, what the expectations are. You can imagine Vancouver Farmers Market here, the competition they have here is very different from the competition in more rural areas. So the expectations of customers here are very different from what they are in rural areas, and therefore the conversation comes a bit different. It also allows you to give you information on decisions around price, what price you might be charging, what products you might be offering, and the type of service as well. It identifies gaps and opportunities by understanding what your market is like. Maybe there's opportunities that you can fill in the market. So, for example, if you're in a more rural area, maybe and you're not situated in on a market street in a town, maybe there's no hot food in your area, so therefore your market could offer hot food because your competition or your neighboring businesses don't offer that. So having a good understanding of what's around you can think, oh, okay, there's an opportunity for me in that market. The other key thing here is as well, David's got some good exercises around the competitive analysis, is not to assume just because you've done it once then that's enough. The market is always changing, especially in retail, in food retail. New businesses come in, and you can bet your bottom dollar that if you're being successful in something, then a competitor is going to identify that and set up their own business. So the example in hot food, if you've got 4, 5, 6 hot food vendors at your market that are doing phenomenally well, then you can quite imagine that a restaurant owner might think, well, hey, hold on a minute, maybe I should be opening up a restaurant in that area, and be opening up, or maybe there's a restaurant already in that area. It's not open up on a Saturday morning when you've got your market going, but now they are opening up on a Saturday morning. So always keep checking on your competition as well, and that market is always changing. The other thing as well is that, and I love this idea of checking your competition, and especially when it comes to farmers markets in towns that you're trying to support, you're trying to work with the local government and bringing business into the market, that your competition actually might be collaborative partners. Now, there might be some competition, but there's some overlap that you can work together. Again, it might be the hot food example, and to say, hey, okay, if you open up, then you're serving my customers, they can use your washrooms, or you promote us and we'll promote you type thing. So sometimes getting an idea of what the competition is might identify some opportunities of collaborative business as well.
Thanks, Darren. So let's get into competitive analysis. And what we're going to do over the next few slides is take you through an example, take you through some examples, and then we're going to work through together, through the magic of the internet. We're going to be working through some examples focusing specifically on farmers markets. Let's take that step back and look first at what we mean by competitive analysis. And in the simplest terms, competitive analysis is about just wondering who are your competitors. This is that idea of taking a step back as well, in terms of one might assume that everyone on your board already knows who your competitors are, in terms of, well, what a simple question that is. The answer may seem obvious to you, but it's always helpful to step back and ask these basic questions just to make sure everyone's on the same page before moving forward. And then the other question, here's where really the part we're going to be focusing on today, is really trying to understand on what basis do the most direct competitors compete with each other. So there's lots and lots of competitors, but you can sort through them in terms of who are more or less the direct competitors. So let's look at that. Well, before we go to the automotive industry, I just want to make that point. What you see in the title here is we're talking about competitive analysis. Specifically, the tool we're going to be using is referred to as strategic group analysis. So if you want to look it up on the internet and find out a bit more about really the tools we're going to be using here, more formally it's known as strategic group analysis. But all of it falls within the general topic of analyzing your competition. So here's the automotive industry, rather blank at the moment, but we can imagine, at least to start, the automotive industry, and we can think of it in terms of the types of cars that it offers. So in very general terms, there are sports cars, luxury cars, pickup trucks, family minivans, and compact cars. This is just a short list that I've made, but intuitively it's the ones that first come to mind, and it gives us this sense that yes, there are a number of different options for customers, for shoppers to choose from if they're looking to buy a new vehicle. But in the world of strategic group analysis, what we want to do is understand if this makes up the automotive industry, what are the differences? They're all competing with each other somehow, some way. And some car manufacturers produce all of these types of cars, and some only produce some of them. So this underlying question is, first we've asked who are the competitors. Now the question is, on what basis do these companies who produce these cars compete? So the idea here is that that box you have of the blue box we have here is we're going to try to figure out how we can locate each of these cars within this box, understand their differences and similarities. So the first thing we need to do is put some labels, figure out, okay, if these all these types of manufacturers are competing against each other, what factors are influencing their strategic choices, business models? So on what basis are they competing? So let's just work our way through this example quickly. And perhaps, well, these are my choices. Other business analysts may choose different dimensions, but I started with performance, in the fact that certainly sports cars are very different from a compact car. And if a customer is very, very particular about performance, that's going to be their first cut. That's what they're going to be evaluating their choices based on. But other customers might look at it based on utility and the functions that a car provides. So these are the two, what we call the factors, the foundations of the business models that drive and have a strong influence over the shape of the automotive sector and how these companies compete against each other. So let's take that next step. And what we want to do is place each of those types of cars on this map. So for example, we know a sports car is, of that group anyways, at the high end of performance for sure, and certainly much higher when compared to the family minivan. But when you compare the sports car versus family minivan and based on utility, the function of the vehicle, family minivan, it's got so many gadgets these days, keeps everyone in the family happy. So it's very high on the utility function, whereas a sports car, you're looking at a two-seater. Primary function there is to go as fast as you can without getting a speeding ticket. We can also plot economy cars on here, where certainly performance is not the standard here. It's just low on performance. It's going to be basically competing based on price. But utility, it still needs to have that certain minimum degree of utility. Otherwise, the economy cars would be competing directly against used cars, and that's just not what new car manufacturers would want to be doing. We have sedans here. I've put sedans pretty high on the performance and in the middle of the road of utility. So in terms of utility, sedans are similar to economy cars. And I also put pickup trucks in here as well, whereas they have certainly less utility than a family minivan, but not near obviously the performance of a sports car. Point I want to make here, but the reason by putting on the pickup truck on here is that it's not quite, doesn't quite fit. It's all that Sesame Street. Which one of these does not fit among the others? And that pickup trucks really don't compete directly with cars. So they're more of an indirect competitor to these. So this is just a point of illustrating that there are, among these options here, there's some that compete more directly with each other than others. But let's just take this analysis another step further by looking at sedans. So here's a similar box, now specifically for sedans. And you may not have noticed, but I changed, utility is still on the bottom axis there, but what I changed the factor we're looking at on the other axis. So it changed from performance and focused on luxury and features. And I'm just going to throw a bunch of car manufacturers on here for you, just to illustrate the point again that not all cars are created equal. Each one of these is marketed to a particular customer and against each other based on certain criteria. And the ones I've played with here is that certainly the luxury and the features of a Bentley and a Rolls-Royce, very high end, but we don't often, well, they're best used for parades with the Queen. Don't see them too often heading out to the campground, versus the Fords and Chevrolets and Hyundais that they or at the other end of the spectrum, certainly far more utility. So by way of these two examples, really just trying to illustrate these ideas that you have competitors, but not every competitor competes, positions themselves the same way. And ultimately, you can look at an industry as a whole and try to understand really what are the business models, what are these factors that are making everyone either stick together or what helps them stand apart. And this is what Darren has been talking about already. Excuse me.
Sorry, I just had some things to add on there, David, if that was okay.
Please, while I get a drink.
Yeah, just to follow on from what I was mentioning before about once you've identified your position in your market, I was trying to give some examples of what that allows you to do once you've identified your essence. And so you've already tried talking about you won't find a Bentley going off to the campsite. So as I mentioned before, once you've identified your essence, how you communicate, how you advertise, promote your market to the wider world. Obviously, if you're a certain car that does go off to the camping site, such as Ford, that would be part of your conversation. That would be your ad campaign, and you can probably picture it now of just seeing cars driving through the forest and off to the campgrounds, whereas Bentley and Rolls-Royce, maybe they not only would have a different look to their advertising, but they would put their advertising in different places, either at different shows or in certain magazines, and would communicate in a certain way and probably have certain people driving those cars. So that's marketing. Once you've identified your position within your market, how you go about executing your marketing plan. Same for service as well. You can very much imagine what the service, if you took your Bentley in to get repaired, what your service would look like compared if you took your Ford to get it repaired. Also product development, the products, how those are developed over time, and what Bentley would focus on, the luxury items within the car, the certain touch of the leather of the seats, the walnut dash display, and how getting the best designers in the world to make it look a certain way, whereas a Ford obviously not so much, wouldn't be focusing on that, but would be focusing on maybe coffee cup holders and other functionalities that families would really appreciate, more of a more room in the back, for example, for the kids. Now the other thing we talked about as well is the market changing as well, and we can see that here in the auto industry. That already we can see a lot of these brands overlapping each other. BMW's coming out with smaller cars and going into the more, and also having more economical cars. In fact, a lot of them are going more economical now. There's luxury options even in Ford cars now, and that's the expectations of customers. And I read recently that Bentley's coming out with an SUV. So markets are changing. You need to be kept on that and see where your competition is. It's coming into your market or touching onto your strengths. So that's the threats that are out there. Customers are also expectations are changing. So you know, if you think about a Ford car now versus a Ford car 20 years ago, well, electric windows and air conditioning now is pretty much standard, but 20 years ago they were probably considered a luxury item and only found in the likes of Bentley. So you can see how things are changing, and you can probably start picture the expectations of when people go to farmers markets now versus what it was 10, 15 years ago. Vendors now have credit card machines, for example, could be one of them, and that's expectations customers are wanting when they come and shopping at the farmers market. So you need to act and change in that. The other thing as well isn't just looking at this, but also when you do the exercise yourself, is identifying that gap. So you know, one gap here is you can identify is maybe there's the economical high performance car, you know, isn't really identified there, or the luxury high performance car isn't there, but that's coming into the market now, such as the Tesla, the electronic cars, very high luxury, high performance, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, but the most economical car out there. So you can see there's gaps that the competition is filling. And So in this case, businesses can also merge and buy each other out as well. And that's what's happening. I mean, you can look at that in your market as that collaboration now. In the auto industry, businesses are sharing engines, for example. You'll find Ford engines in other cars and vice versa in technology. So as long as they don't compete in the same market, they might share that knowledge. And that's what we're talking about with collaborating with your competition. Okay, we don't offer hot food, but there's a restaurant there. Let's collaborate together. You open up when we're doing the markets, but you promote us and we'll promote you. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Darren. So now what we want to do is just change gears, and keeping in mind what we just went through with the automotive industry and all the examples that Darren's been giving you, just populating your brain with some ideas. What we want to do is focus on farmers markets and see what a strategic group analysis might look for your market. So here's where we are pulling up some questions that were on the worksheets that were distributed, that Chris distributed prior to this webinar. So these questions should be familiar to you. So one of the questions we asked was, what industry does your farmers market participate in? What I asked you to do is to list at least 5 possible industries. And then after you've done some brainstorming, select the best answer. In here, Chris, if I might, I just want to invite participants out there to share some of their answers, just to give us a sense of the range of possible answers. People can start with their best answer, but feel free to throw out some other possibilities, other ideas that they came up with. So Chris, perhaps, if you could ask people for some answers, that'd be great.
Great. So we'll do this one as a, you can put your hand up and we'll go through. And if you've got your hand up, that little hand icon that's on your control panel, I will bring your question to or your answer to David for this one. So we'll take a few of you. All right. Let's go with, we're going to go with Dennis. Dennis, could you just tell us what market you're from and your answers for that, please? Are you there, Dennis?
You hear me?
I can hear you. Just turn up your sound a little bit there, Dennis.
Okay, I'm not sure that I can turn my volume up on the. We'll try it here.
Okay, I can hear you. What's your answers?
I felt that that our market, which is a community market, was involved in local food retailing and distribution, and we offering fresh vegetables and cut flowers and nursery products. And we also have vendors who have value-added artisanal food products, and vendors that sell locally produced craft wares and personal services.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Dennis. And now we're going to go to, we don't have any more hands. We've got some answers that have been, Randall from Prince George says they're in the food business. And Tabitha is direct farm marketing. Those are answers that they've typed into the questions. Does anybody else have any answers that they'd like to share with us? Lawrence from Prince George didn't write it in his answer. Apparently he's selling Prince George. Oh, here we go. One from Roger. We're just going to bring Roger in. Roger, what was one of your answers?
Hi, everybody. It's Roger from Mission City Farmers Market. Other than some of the things that I have the same as people, I had entertainment and being a community center.
Excellent. Okay, that's another set, the entertainment, the community center part of it. It looks like about all the answers that we've got right now, David. Oh,
Sounds
here
good.
we go.
Thank you.
Let's get one more in here. We have awareness and demand for local food from Donna Gibson, retail from Cranbrook, entertainment and education from Pemberton, agriculture and tourism, history and tourism. So tourism seems to be fitting in there quite a bit, David.
Yeah, thanks everyone for those answers. Thanks, Chris, for helping along. When we've asked that question during workshops, I'm always surprised by the range of answers, and certainly the ones I've just heard now are similar to the ones I've heard before. And it speaks to really the possibilities. And again, we start off with what would be some basic questions related to the business of farmers markets, but the answers aren't always as simple or as direct. And ultimately, it's that old adage where you can't be everything to anyone, to everyone. So if you're focusing on that core business and focusing on your essence, there's always room for discussion to work your way through these possibilities with your fellow board members and other members of the market, really to get onto the same page, but to work through what each of your ideas are. And ultimately, it really does need to come down to one answer in terms of there's really only one primary industry. There may be a lot of benefits, a lot of advantages, but what is that industry you're in? Now I want to do that second question we asked was that given the one industry that you selected among the options that you may have listed, just want you to identify who your competitors are. So who are your market's competitors given the industry that you selected? So Chris, if we can just do that again, just to get some rapid responses back, just to get a sense of the breadth and the possibilities that came up under those different industries that people were talking about.
Great. Okay, we can do that, Dave. So once again, folks, if you want to put your answer in verbally with your audio, put your hand up in the control panel, and I'll get to you. And if you've got some that you can type in, I'll get to those as well. So we're going to start with Randall. Randall, go ahead. Randall, go ahead. Go ahead, Randall.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. There's a few here. Dealing with the food business, which is probably the primary. What we'd be looking at is probably we've got grocery store selection. Others that come into play are other markets. Craft fairs for other the jams and jelly component of the farm products. We have farm direct sales. We also have meat markets. We compete with our farmers in the meat section, and we also have the mobile food trucks. They're also part of the market, but may become competition in their own role.
Great. Thanks very much, Randall.
Thanks very much, Randall.
And we'll go down to take some of the questions that were written in. We have from Cranbrook, other markets, grocery stores and restaurants. From Langley, supermarkets, restaurants, other local markets. Pemberton, CSA boxes. That's one that's definitely up there. It comes up a few times. Other farmers markets, local food stores, CSA, farm gate sales, and Sunday activities. From Tabitha. And Mary from Artisans has other farmers markets. Malls for customers who do not want to be connected to the producer. And Peter LeBlanc says, our competition are 3 to 4 grocery chain stores and a fruit and veg stalls. So there's a good selection of answers for you, David.
Thank you, Chris. And again, thanks for everyone for your answers. Hopefully you can get a sense from, and you can, perhaps if you're listening closely, then you can see how the different answers potentially came from and were related to the specific industry that they selected. I'm thinking of the Sunday activities. Tabitha, that's a nice one to add to the list. But if you're thinking about Sunday activities as a competitor to farmers markets, it does beg that question. And I wonder what industry the market is that it would compete with Sunday activities. So that is that exercise. These are the kind of exercises you can go through with your board members as a group. Again, engage in these conversations really to get a deeper understanding of each person's perspective on the market. So now what I want to do is go to, on your worksheets again, what I provided were 2 blank boxes. You'll see 2 that look like this. And I'd like you to work with the top one in terms of fill in some answers. So for example, what we just asked were competitors. You can keep that list handy as we go through this stage of the webinar. But what I would like you to do with this box is up there right beside industry is write down the name of the industry that you selected. So if you chose tourism or food, I'm trying to remember some of the other ones you guys selected, but there are a number of possibilities up there. So I'd like you to write that in at the top of this box beside the word industry. And the next thing I want you to do is put on your creative thinking caps, is think about, given the industry you selected, given the list of competitors you selected, like we did with the automobile sector, what are the factors you think? So you take a look at the list of competitors you had down. What are the two factors that differentiate those competitors from each other? What makes one stand out from the other, but at the same time hold them all together within this particular industry that you selected? So just take a minute to do that. And this is an exercise. A minute is really not a lot of time to do this. So just give it your best shot. I just want you to start the thinking process. And then I'm going to, over the next few minutes, work your way through two possible examples. I just want to give you your opportunity for you to first think that through. So you're identifying the two factors, and then you label the axes in terms of high or low, or broad or narrow, or whatever those categories, the corresponding words might be that describes the range associated with each factor. So hopefully you've had that chance to at least identify one, or maybe you've had a quick answer to identify both. Through this exercise, the next step would be, and is, to plot the industry players now within the box, again, just like I did with the automotive sector. So where does competitor A fit, competitor B, C, D, and E? So each one really finds their place, their position within this industry based on how they each play off of the two factors that you selected. So again, just take a moment just to, as best you can in this short period of time, to write out, plot where the competitors are that you selected. Now, I'm not going to ask you to report. I think it'd be too difficult to be able to describe what you've done. But let's move on just to the example that we've selected. What I'd like to focus on first is, what if we selected food retail as the industry in which farmers markets compete? And based on my work and based on some workshops I have done, this is usually the one that gets the most consensus, the most agreement in terms of what industry farmers markets compete in. And here's what's the primary industry, the most common answer. So the next step is think about food retail is in terms of what are the factors, and what I've selected is price. And price is very closely associated with volume, so price and volume tend to go together in these kinds of analyses. But the other one I selected for food retail, and here I'm thinking about a number of the competitors that you did mention. Think about grocery stores primarily. And when we think about grocery stores, price is a big factor, but the other factor is the breadth of products and services. So you go online, you do your Google searches, you'll see these are some of the factors that help distinguish and differentiate food retailers among each other. So I just selected a few competitors just to illustrate the point here. I mean, you have the Costco's and the Walmarts of the world, which are clearly very high breadth of products and services, and they position themselves at very low prices. Save on Foods, here in BC at least, it competes certainly closely with the Costco's and Walmart, but certainly doesn't have the same volume or breadth that the others have. And then as you move down the scale, certainly smaller grocery stores, chains, just try to compete on the same basis, but tend not to be able to have the same volume, so have slightly higher prices and just don't have the square footage really to provide the breadth of products and services. And you have convenience stores, the good old corner stores. So just building on this, there are other food retailers, but stopping there, we can ask the question, where do farmers markets fit on this particular strategic group map? So if we're in the food retail sector, we're looking at price and we're looking at breadth of products and services. Here's where I put farmers markets. And this is up for debate. You could think that it's, well, big contention that certainly among customers is that farmers markets are always perceived to have high prices. So that's certainly leave that up to some further study in terms of where exactly it fits on the price scale. But this is where I put it, at least for this point, for this discussion. But you can certainly see here that regardless of specifically where I put the farmers markets on this chart, it does have a place somewhere on this map in relation to these other food retailers. And if this is the industry that farmers markets view themselves as, this next picture shows more of the reality. This looks pretty tame, and looks like farmers markets have a nice comfy position in this map. But this is more closer to reality, where actually Walmart, if I really had the font size, it would be about 10 times bigger than that. I'm sure it would just dominate the entire page. And farmers markets, they're over here somewhere. Again, the font size here is probably exaggerated. In terms of percentage of the total food retail sector, farmers markets are pretty tiny. So from this analysis, you can see that, well, yes, farmers markets compete on price and breadth of products. So, and one can view farmers markets as being a player in the food retail sector. But the obligation that sets up is that you as a farmers market are explicitly choosing to compete strategically against the Walmarts of the world, against the Save-Ons of the world. And that's an incredibly difficult task if you see yourself as a competitor, as a player in the food retail sector. So one of the advantages of me presenting this food retail analysis within workshops is to illustrate that point, but to illustrate to the point that a farmer's market can choose in terms of, it can choose more specifically what industry it competes in. So let's take it to the next example. And that's looking at...
Sorry, Dave, can I just come in there?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's all right.
Yep.
So yeah, I just want to follow on from what you're saying, but I think a lot of people have really identified that as well already with some of the examples they've been giving, and not picking food retail outright. But obviously, as David has been saying, that food retail is really highly competitive, and you know, farmers market entering that sector, there are some inherent disadvantages, and I think David just highlighted some of them. Not just about price or breadth of products, but you know, breadth of services. You've got limited opening times, really, is an inherent disadvantage because you're only open once a week, maybe twice a week, and that limited product selection. So, you know, while you could look at farmers market competing for customers' food budget, do you want to position yourself against the likes of Walmart and see them as competition? So just to use kind of another example, restaurant industry, defined dining restaurants such as Bishop's here in Vancouver see themselves competing with McDonald's. Obviously they don't, otherwise they would lose in that sector if they communicated the way McDonald's communicated to those customers about that type of product range. So they're asking themselves, why else do people go to a restaurant besides eating cheap food under bright lights? You know, so we ask ourselves that question: why do people go grocery shopping? Sounds strange, but besides buying food, how do people feel about the food that they buy? And should all food or groceries be treated equally? Is it just, do we see it just as a commodity? Are customers going to farmers markets seeing food or what they buy at a farmers market as commodities as they would do if they went into Walmart? Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in. Yeah, thanks, Darren. Thanks for jumping in.
Yeah, no worries.
So the next slide is, let's leave the food retail. There's some really good lessons that Darren just highlighted here in terms of why farmers markets can choose to be in the food retail sector, but probably should reconsider which industry what industry they want to be in, but more specifically, on what basis do they want to compete and make themselves stand out. So as was mentioned, and I believe it might have been Tabitha, one of her answers was that farmers markets are in the farm direct food retail sector. So we've already identified the industry. The next step here is to identify the competitors. And here the competitors change in the farm direct marketing sector. Specifically, as mentioned, we heard earlier, certainly a number of you responded with CSA, so community supported agriculture. Other farmers markets heard that a lot already in this webinar. Farm gate sales, internet sales, in terms of farms. Those are the competitors in the direct competitors in the farm direct industry. But now comes that creative part, and really this point where you can engage your fellow board members and market vendors in really interesting discussions in terms of on what basis do we compete with farm gate sales? On what basis do we compete with CSAs? Those are interesting questions that really forces one to be more precise, be more specific, and moving away from the standard, well, we compete on price and selection. So think about that for a second. I'm going to show you our answers, but once after you develop the two dimensions in the same process, identify what the two factors are that really define the farm direct sector, and then plot those direct competitors on the map. So let me show you what we came up with. And perhaps you find this surprising, but perhaps not. One of the factors that we selected was relationship with the farmer. Nothing defines the farm direct sector better than the fact that what it's trying to promote is a relationship with the farmer. And here we have a range of in-person relations versus personal. Those are the range of possibilities we selected. And the other one, I don't think you'd be surprised. You might be surprised you didn't come up with it earlier, but some of you did. And that's that social experience. What is, the one thing that's just throughout all the literature is, and among customers, they certainly talk highly of the social experience of a farmer's market. So when you combine these two factors, the relationship with the farmer and social experience, these are ones, again, you might have different ones, but these two, for me, really help to define the basis upon which competitors in the farm direct marketing sector really do compete with each other. What helps them stand out. So what we have as an outcome is you do have CSAs, farmers markets, UPIC and farm gate sales, and there's also internet sales, really at the high end of the social experience and at the high end of the personal relationship with the farmer. What I've done here is I haven't worked out to differentiate them very much on this map, but this order is in a specific order where CSAs do have a more personal relationship than farmers markets with farmers, and farmers markets are more personal relation with farmer than UPIC, and more personal than farm gate. Here I'm thinking of farm gate where it's just at the end of the driveway and you're picking things up. So there's definitely more work and lots of discussion to be had around how these four and the others compete with each other on these two dimensions. But for present purposes, I just want to emphasize that this forms a strategic group that really stands out on its own. And more importantly, it stands out as being very, very different from the Walmarts, the Save-On, Shopper Wholesale, sorry, that's a Prince George one, and corner stores. But here, again, I have a dotted white oval here to point out that we're farmers market in the farm direct retail sector. The corner stores and Walmarts of the world are not direct competitors in the same way that a pickup truck doesn't compete with a sedan or a minivan directly. So these are very different entities. But having said that, it's important to recognize that when you go into these stores, they are promoting themselves as selling local products and having these personal relations with farmers. So they are certainly trying to present themselves as providing a farm direct quality relationship. So farmers markets cannot ignore them. But at the same time, it's quite empowering for a farmers market to realize and recognize that we don't have to compete directly with the Walmarts and large grocery stores. We actually can choose to focus on the essence of who we are in terms of relationship with the farmer and the social experience. So lots of big messages here, but this really, going through this exercise, few points to make here is how it's important to be precise with the industry you select. And there are some choices to be made in terms of how specific and precise the industry is labeled, because it does change the way you can put the same competitors on different maps and have very, very different outcomes as we've shown here. But the ultimate outcome is to get a far better sense of who the direct competitors are with farmers markets, and that in and of itself lends insight to who and what the core business of a farmers market is. Darren, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, just to re-emphasize what you've just been saying there, Dave, that find out, you know, this sector now is what farmers markets can compete in. It's the strength of a farmers market and their advantage. So the competition are still businesses that sell food. In all the cases, they're still after that grocery budget of your customers, but it's looking at it in at a different angle. And it's the same way that customers look at the farmers market, look at you as a business. So again, coming back to what we were saying at the start, this really helps you focus on who your competition is and how you could lose customers, potentially other farmers markets, you know, your loyal customers who spend a lot of money with you, the $40, $50, $60 customers, could quite easily go to another farmers market, or maybe they like the idea of a CSA program when it's available during the summer. So how do you retain those customers? What really resonates with those loyal, high-spending customers? And the other thing as well we talked about at the start was strengthening your communication and marketing around this essence as well. Now we're talking about relationships with farmers and social experience. We're not talking about price. So how does that? How do you communicate that with any print ads you might have, or any stories you're telling in the newspaper, or even the experience that the customers have when they come to the farmers market? Maybe, you know, part of your strategy might be vendor workshops and how they deal with customers and make sure customer service is number one for them and that experience, and they have to know that they sharing their story. I spoke to a lot of vendors who are a bit kind of embarrassed about sharing their story and don't want to brag or feel it's not relevant when it's really relevant, and that's what customers are there for. So just, you know, you've got to make sure vendors know that they want to talk about you, the farm, how you grow the food, what you've been growing, what troubles and tribulations you've been through, and that could be followed through on Twitter accounts, etc. So they get even more of a relationship with the farmer there. And it also gives you new relevant ideas as well. So, you know, we've identified CSA as a competitor, and as we talked about before, well, CSA may be an offering that farmers markets could have, or maybe it's a collaboration with those CSA programs, UPIC or FarmGates. Maybe there's some cross promotion there that you see there's some kind of overlap, but you're not overly competing as well. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. What we can see on this map, we're talking about competitive analysis, but an inevitable outcome of competitive analysis is this idea of market position. So in this map you're looking at right now in the farm direct food retail sector, we really get visually, the whole idea here is to visually see what the farmers market's position is in the industry that it participates in. So this is market positioning, the second piece of the webinar. And market positioning by definition, here it is, to get customers' attention and dollars. A business tries to distinguish itself from its competitors and to differentiate its product. We've been talking about that already. And really, it's to turn the strengths into an advantage. And that's what we said at the outset of this webinar, really the ultimate singular aim that we're trying to do is really helping you to focus on your strengths from a business perspective, so you can turn it into an advantage. And those, again, things that Darren was just describing. So here, What I'd like to do with the second blank chart you have is just quickly write in farm direct food retail as the name of the industry and just write these axes on that second blank chart, the one at the bottom half of the page. So scribble those in, and then I'd like you to just within this box position where you think your farmer's market is. So for example, and here I've added some grids. You don't have grids on yours, but I've put in some grids here, and I've just put an example in terms of, well, farmer's market, my farmer's market is in position D3. So what I've done here is label the grid that I've created. So it's on the vertical axis, you have a D, and horizontal axis, position 3. So this is this particular farmer's market's position within the industry. And what I'd like you to do, and we're going to get interactive again, is put your market in this box. So where do you think it is in terms of, is it high or low based on social experience, or how high or how low? And relationship with farmer in terms of how personal or how impersonal. And here your points of reference should be, well, my market in relation to other markets nearby that I know about, my market in relation to CSAs, my market in relation to internet sales or farm gate sales. You're just going to have to come up with your own points of reference. If there's none of those are directly in your area, just think in general terms. How does your market fit with your sense of what the ideal CSA is like, or the typical CSA, the typical farm gate sale? So somewhere on this, plot your farmer's market. And Chris, if I can ask you to lead this one, and perhaps if everyone can, when you have it plotted, if you could type in your answer in terms of, put the letter first and then the number, so D3, like the previous example, just type it in, and then Chris, if you could read those out. What I'll try to do is record people's answers on the chart here like we did last time.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, David. Right now, we've got Comox with Vicky. She's at C6. Coquitlam at A7. Cranbrook, B6. Prince George is C5. Squamish is B6. Pemberton, A7. Surrey, B4. Langley, C4. Donna Gibson, and I'm not sure which one she's from, sorry Donna, but you're B6. Oak Street Farmers Market, B6. Yeah. Oak Street Farmers Market, A6. Mission, with no number, Douglow, B7. Squamish, B6. And Goldstream, C5. UBC Farm at A7. Gives you a pretty good indication there, doesn't it? Mission City, B6. And I think that's it for now. I think that's pretty much the leads have answered the questions there.
Sounds good. Sounds like we have some, looks like we have some amazing markets out there. Very strong positions on both ends. Yeah, I guess it would be interesting in terms of, if you are at the A7 mark, well, be interesting points of discussion in terms of whether everyone on your board market agrees with that. So certainly in the high categories of both ends. So well done to both the markets that are up at that end. What I want to get to next is that when you understand your core business as a farmer's market, when you understand that there really are competitors out there and you have specific relations with them, and you get to this point where you have a solid understanding of your position within the marketplace, now is a good time when you can really step back and reflect on your strengths. So typical SWOT analysis, for example, sure, I'll assume everyone has heard of this, but it's visioning or strategic planning 101. Usually the first thing you do where you look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So internally, you look at the strengths and weaknesses, and externally, looking at opportunities and threats. Most strategic planning exercises, in my opinion, introduce the SWOT analysis too early in the process. Going back to that idea is that before you can do a SWOT analysis, before you can look forward or even look at evaluate where you are, really is a great opportunity to step back and understand that essence of the farmer's market. It's where its position is, who the competitors are. So what we've done to the 2 webinars so far is getting you to the position by doing that kind of exercise that just popped on your screen, that strategic group analysis. Really, if you've spent a few hours with your board members really debating this and figuring out exactly where you are, where everyone seems to be on the same page, there's certainly always room for disagreement, but you should come to some consensus of where you're at. And it's when you get to that point of consensus when you can have a much more productive discussion around what are our strengths in terms of why are we here, what are our weaknesses, why are we not over there. As well, now you can also better understand opportunities and threats. I'm not going to go through a SWOT analysis, but really want to make that point in terms of at this point you're in a really, really good position to really get into strategic business planning. It really does start with understanding one's current market position in the marketplace. So it's with that understanding you can now actively decide on what that desirable path of market development will be, and maintaining that external focus on competitors so that you can turn your strengths into a competitive advantage. So the next thing I want you to do, and you might get a chuckle out of this one, what I want to do is just ask you, where would you like your farmers market to be in 2, 3, or 5 years from now? And this gets to that question in terms of any planning effort. It's what is that desirable path that we want to follow in order to build upon our strengths? And the reason why I'm saying you might be chuckling is for all those markets that are up in the B6, A7 range, we have to make a new chart somehow, some way, so you have a path to move towards. But having said that, I would, even for those who are up in the A7 range, I'm sure there's still lots of discussion in terms of, well, what is that next step? What does that next phase of our market development look like? If we were up here with relationship with farmer and social experience, then what is our path of development? So it doesn't, even if you're in that A7 category, still tremendous opportunity right now to be asking yourself, where would you like to be in 3 or 5 years from now? And again, that really stands at the foundation of what it means to do strategic business planning. Darren, do you want to jump in with a comment?
Yeah, so it's really great going through these exercises last week and this week, and David taking you through these exercises. And as he says, we're at a position now where either you can develop a business strategy or at least enhance one that you've already got. And the first step would be, and even from just these exercises, identifying your competition, where you are on that grid with the social experience relationship with the farmer. What are your advantages? You can put a mission statement together. You can just put a 1-2 sentence mission statement based on your competitive advantage. And once you've done that, and it's obviously better to do that as a team, with your board or with some vendors, staff, make sure everyone's happy with that. You can start to just drill down that to different objectives of the market and how you deliver on that mission statement, how you can strengthen your mission statement or strengthen your service that meets that essence, if you wish. From these objectives, all you need to do is filter that down to actual, and with those objectives in mind, look at it over a 12, 24-month or even 5-year period and start to put down some goals of how you get there and who's going to do them, and make sure they've got enough resources to do that. And this really is what a business strategy document is. It's that tool to go to the next step and start to treat your farmers market as a business, and start to kind of focus underneath that essence, underneath that mission statement. And then underneath each goals, you write sub goals and how to take the steps towards each of those goals that meet the objectives, that meet the mission statement, and make sure it all fits back together, and also aligns with your financial goals as well, to make sure that it is achievable, it realistically fits within your budget. So you're not shooting for the stars, but everything that you're planning is budgeted for. And then goals may include, so for example, looking at your relationship with the farmer's social experience, and what you provide in the community that you're in. Just some examples of goals could be opening times, for example, new vendors to bring on board, marketing plan, and also policy document as well, just to strengthen your competitive advantage, to strengthen your social experience. So I talked about vendor workshops and that customer experience. If social experience is important, it's a strength of yours, you've got to maintain that strength, and therefore it's really important for you as a farmer's market that the vendors are good vendors, that their merchandising display is beautiful, and then very knowledgeable about their product. I mean, sometimes it's a given because they're growing it in the first place or making it in the first place, but that might not always be the case, or their personality might not come through, and they just need some encouragement there. And as David alluded to, just in that SWOT analysis, you can drill further down into that SWOT analysis or competition analysis to further fill your strategy document, just to go into more detail. But as a top layer, just that mission statement, objectives, goals, and sub-goals really do give you a lot of tools to move your business forward. And then you can write a paragraph on each of those sections as well. You can write a paragraph in each of your competition, for example, if you want to just kind of formalize that information that you're gathering, and also include your strategic group analysis, and all of a sudden you've got a strategic document you could be working on. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Yeah, that point is Darren's comments just emphasize how, well, in my view, we're just really getting to the point of starting the planning process. It really is those working from first principles, but investing a significant and sufficient amount of time, as I've said a few times already, but to get everyone as close as possible to the same page before moving forward, before jumping into the document, before starting writing. There really is a lot of room for some collective brainstorming and some just sharing. And these are really incredible tools just to help focus the discussion and, as I said, bring people together. So again, through the workshops where I use these tools, through that experience, one of the greatest insights for me was, so Darren's mentioned vision and mission and goals and sub-goals. Eventually you do want to get down to specific strategies in terms of how do we get there? What strategies are we going to use to develop the market? And that, so in other words, it's what strategies can we use to position our farmers market and move it down that development path? So the question is, what tools are available to help you do this? And specifically in relation to your competitors. So typically, positioning is usually achieved through pricing and quality. This, typically, in every other industry, pricing and quality is a big factor. And it's typically reinforced through advertising, promotions, and branding. And this is what Darren was saying specifically earlier in terms of really, once you figure out what your advantage is, what your strengths are, where you want to position, those are the messages you want to carry forward through advertising, promotions, and branding. But this is the big insight that I had, and well, I'll share it with you. Just within farmers markets, it's your market's policies that are the essential tools to support market positioning. So you might find this actually quite obvious. To me, it was I guess when I first thought about it, I thought it was obvious as well. But then the more I thought about it, it was really, this to me were really the critical elements, the essential tools. And that shift that I had in my mindset was that typically market policies are viewed as rules that are used to control vendors. You can't do this, you can't do this, you must do that, you must do that. So rather than thinking of market policies as a set of rules in order to control vendors, it really is a different perspective in terms of how can we use these market policies to strengthen our position within the marketplace. So that was the insight for me, was that mental shift from viewing them as rules to tools. So specifically, here's four policy areas that are perhaps some of the more debated ones, but the ones that each one of them alone can be used quite easily to position and turn your strengths into specific advantages in the marketplace. So those are geographic boundaries, staffing at vendor tables, cooperative selling arrangements, and reselling produce. And here we're interpreting these four policies in the context. We have to picture, go back to a previous slide, maybe I'll do that quickly. Yeah. How do you use those four policies of geographic boundaries? How can that help you move down your desired development path? How can your policy around staffing of vendor tables help you move along that path? Cooperative selling arrangements and reselling of produce. How do these either strengthen or weaken your position in the marketplace? So Darren, do you have some examples that come to mind?
I do, yeah. So when you talk about geographic boundaries and having that as your policy document, it's defining what local is would be a real good example there, and asking yourself, what resonates with your customers. I think when you go into a retail store, such as Save on Foods, people go in there and they might see or buy BC, and that resonates with them. But when you go to a farmer's market, I don't think that is the case. So they're buying direct from the farmers. So do you want to look at a specific geographic region around your farmer's market, and that's what your focus is. And again, that's what your essence is, and that's your strength, and that's what you can talk about. Now, the thing about that is that it really strengthens the loyalty of your customers when you identify that and you really focus on that, and your principles, your policies don't go outside of that. And so you have a lot of credibility around what you define there. Improving the customer experience. So I talked about those vendor workshops and working with vendors and making sure their customer service is number one. Not only does that improve loyalty of customers, but also, and this comes back to the business of having this strategy and the business of having these policies in place and how it can improve the performance of the farmers markets. When you have amazing customer experience, and I'm sure we're all the same here, we tell people about it. So you're referring new customers to the market. If you're wowing them, if that's part of your mission, is that social experience, and you are really honed in on that, your staff, your vendors, your promotions that you're doing, your events that you're putting on. And I know this is something that Bruce was looking at as part of their strategy when I was working with him, and that experience that you get when you come to the market and around educating about farming and etc. Then people will go home and just say, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened at the farmers market today, and it's happening next week, and you've got to bring your kids down, it's fantastic, and our kids learnt about X, Y, and Z. And what's also really good about having a strong policy as well is it reduces that vendor and customer confusion and manages your risk. And so that comes about defining local, defining what vendors that you're allowed there. Dave's got there up on the slide about cooperative selling arrangements and reselling produce. If your mission, if your competitive advantage is farmer connection, and all of a sudden you're finding that the vendors who are at the table don't really know what's going on at the farm because they're not really at the farm, and they don't really know about growing or don't even know about what to cook with the produce, then that dilutes it. Or even worse still, if you've just got a reseller there, and then obviously now you've diluted your strength. If that's something you're talking about and communicating, but customers are not experiencing that, then not only are they not going to be loyal, but they might start bad-mouthing you to other potential customers out there as well, and therefore business will go down. So hence why those policies are really key to put in place to maintain your competitive advantage.
Thanks, Darren. And just you started off by defining local, and I'm just reminded of Randall's question during last week's webinar. That was one of the questions he posed to us in terms of what's our working definition of local. So just want to acknowledge that was a question that Randall asked last week. Just also want to point out, just building on what, or adding to what Darren just said, is that there are some markets that will deliberately choose policies that you would not choose. They might deliberately choose to soften or lessen that relationship with farmer because there's other advantages to them of doing that. They're not going for, I used this word last week, that authentic marketing experience. So there are markets, as the marketplace becomes more and more crowded, we will be seeing more and more markets that choose different strategies. Just like you have that range of cars, not every car is competing to be at the top end of the luxury features. You're going to have some economy cars that serve that market. It's going to happen among farmers markets as well, where you will see some very specific positioning of markets right across the spectrum, which sets up challenges of protecting that brand image always as well. So as a way of closing, I just wanted to spend a minute just reminding folks of some resources that are out there to help you through this strategic business planning process. And these have been available for a couple of years now, but this is a set of pamphlets that were developed by the BC Association of Farmers Markets under the banner of Selling at BC's Farmers Markets. They're available online here, or go to the BCFM website and certainly search for them. What there's 7 different brochures, one that profiles farmers markets, one that profiles market customers, and then we've arranged these brochures, information packages by types of vendors as well, in terms of broken down between vegetables, fruits and veggies, and meat. But here's just a quick example of what's out there or what's in the materials. So we did some surveys of farmer vendors. So we have some data, some information to help you understand your market and how it functions compared to the average market in BC. So percentage of sales at farmers markets, to what extent do farmers or farmer vendors, and this specifically I should point out is about farmer vendors, not craft vendors. But to what extent do farmer vendors use other marketing channels? So where does the farmers market fit in this mix? And the other types of information is just profiles of the number of gross revenues and the number of farmers markets used. So here, for example, we can see that most of the farmer vendors are rather small. Most of them only sell at one market and have gross revenues of less than $20,000. Yet there is a smaller but significantly important number of vendors who sell at multiple markets, 4 or more markets, and pulling in much larger gross revenues. So I didn't want to discuss those, but those are just to remind you of these resources that are available through BCFM to help your market work its way through your strategic business planning processes. So with that, that brings the webinar to an end, and turn it over to Chris to entertain any questions that we have from our participants.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, David and Darren. That was an excellent presentation. So, folks, if you have any questions that you'd like to have answered, you have 2 choices. You can put your hand up, and we've got about 7 or 8 minutes to do some verbal, or we can send them. If you type them in, we can send them directly to David or Darren. If you could, again, please put which market you're representing in there, that would be fantastic. So just looking around to see if we have any questions going so far here.
So Chris, I'll just jump in and say, based on my screen at the moment, I haven't configured it so that I cannot see the answers to the questions at the moment. So Darren,
Oh, okay.
send them to Darren, please.
Okay, I'll do that.
I'll answer the oral questions, or help answer the oral questions.
I think you've stumped him. I'm not getting a. Oh, here we go.
I
We've
mean,
been
maybe Chris
asked.
just read them out.
Yeah, we've
Maybe
been asked
Chris,
if
I
we
think that's what
could
we did last time.
scroll back to some of the text-heavy slides so that I can make sure my notes are complete. Not sure. That's from Barbara. I'm not sure which the text-heavy slides are, but again, Barbara, the this presentation will be available. The webinar will be available online, and we will make the PowerPoint presentation available online as well. So we'll be able to. We'll send that to you as well, so that you'll have that opportunity to go back and check that out. Do we have any other questions out there for Dave or Darren?
Could be a good sign.
That's a good sign. It means you've got to definitely have them thinking. While we're waiting to see if we do have any questions, I just want to remind you folks that one of the next steps for this for the process here is to get your assessment done if you're taking part in the mentorship program as well. If you haven't contacted me to set up a time to get your mentoring or your assessment done, please do so. That'll be very, very. That's the basis from which we're going to move your market forward. So it's been the last 8 assessments we've done. It's provided some great baselines that indicate in the different areas of the webinars what we're going to be doing, where the market capacity is in those areas, and how they can move them forward. So we're going to go to Mihaela from Squamish. She's asking, is there a general trend that you notice in farmers markets?
Perhaps I'll answer first, and Darren, you can jump in. I'll answer based on the research that I completed both first in 2006 and then in 2012, where we looked at the economic benefits of farmers markets. And over that 6-year period, there's some very strong trends. Some of them are rather obvious in terms of the number of farmers markets has grown significantly. But we've also found that more people are shopping at farmers markets, but most importantly, those customers are spending more at farmers markets. So I think that's, from the vendor's point of view, probably the single most significant trend that was revealed through that study that was done 6 years apart within BC farmers markets. So that's BC specific data. And the other thing I'll add is that idea of authenticity. A trend among farmers markets in Canada and North America wide is an increasing concern about protecting that farmers market brand, that notion of what is an authentic market. I know BC Association of Farmers Markets debated it, was it 3 years ago perhaps, at its annual general meeting. I know there has been significant work in Ontario. There's even a certification program. So regardless of what particular solution is designed for it, it's certainly it is a trend which, going back to the start of last week's webinar, seems to be an inevitable outcome of just an increasingly competitive marketplace. Darren, do you want to add to that?
Just a tiny little bit, that authenticity I think is really key. I completely agree with that. And I think what comes with that and what trend I've seen is obviously with the popularity of farmers markets. Farmers markets are increasing the number of vendors that they're taking on board, and which in turn leads to a broader selection of products, which is fantastic. But it still really needs to come back to that authenticity or that competitive advantage that farmers markets have, which is, it's got to be the producer of the product. And that's got to be maintained. So the trend is, as David's saying, is that people are spending more when they go to markets because there's more options there, and more vendors are turning up, and so that's why I think it's really key having those policies in place as new vendors are coming on board, and vendor onboarding procedures, if you wish, to make sure that they understand the rules, policies of the market to maintain that authenticity is really key.
Those are great answers. Thanks, guys. So we've got time for two more, and if we can keep it, we'll keep it down to these ones. Then we'll wrap the webinar up. One of the questions that definitely comes up is: there a saturation point where there will be too many markets competing for vendors and customers, and will this lead to cutthroat competition and a resulting dilution of the farmers market brand? And that was from Doug Lowe.
I don't know if David's done any research on this. I can only talk from my gut on this one, where just some assumptions that you have to bring in. What I feel is, on one hand, competition for vendors to me is definitely a challenge, but a nice challenge to have, because I think we're all in this to increase the production of local food, increase the access of local food to the general population, and for the benefits that provides. So if we can increase the number of vendors and increase the number of people farming, then that's a good thing. So I think the Association of Farmers Markets needs to kind of look at that and address that. So that's a nice thing. That saturation point is interesting, because just in any business, that's really hard to identify, because at the end of the day, people are buying food at farmers markets, and as a percentage of the overall food that's been bought in BC, for example, is really, really tiny. So you could say to the saturation point is when no one's going shopping at Save On Foods anymore, and everyone's going shopping at farmers markets. So to me, the potential is absolutely massive, and that comes from that cultural change to allow people to do that shopping. Sorry, not allow. For them to be motivated to go to farmers markets or public markets, as opposed to actual going to a normal grocery store. So the potential to me is absolutely huge, and it's changing that culture, and that's really hard to identify that. So yeah, based on that of where people want to shop, there is competition between different farmers markets, but to me, it's because there's only a certain number of people going shopping at farmers markets, and I think competition is a good thing and allows that noise to be heard even more, and hopefully attracts more people to come to farmers markets. So it's going through that pain initially and then taking that jump again. I know people, when Kitsilano Farmers Market was opened up, there was a real worry that it would take away from Trout Lake, and I think maybe initially there was a bit of that, but now it's just as popular as Trout Lake, and Trout Lake is as popular as ever. So as you can see, there's an initial saturation, but then that opens back up again. So there's different ways of looking at it there.
Great, thanks very much, Darren. David, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that was a great answer, and just to emphasize that. Yeah, it's one that's just very difficult to predict, but given the size of the opportunity to just keep increasing the potential customer base, there's potentially a long way to go yet for farmers markets if current trends continue in the path the way they are.